Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
And to my right is Marion Serfass, our finance director.
Good, Mercury.
This is our
Nice
favorite.
to see you.
This is our favorite topic.
It is our favorite
we
topic.
Always say this is our favorite topic, budgeting. And so first we'll talk about a few priorities in the upcoming year, things that are important for putting the budget together. So maybe I'll start with the mayor and ask you what's important to the council. Maybe talk a little bit about the perspective of the council when it comes to budgeting.
Well, I would say, perhaps the most important thing that the council does. I mean, these are taxpayers, this is their money. And what are we going to do? And so we are tasked, it's very important. We have to be fiscally conservative, I think, provide good services for our residents. And then things that we hear from our residents throughout the year. Not just at election time, but throughout the year, people contact us just having everyday conversations. We get emails. We get people who come to the council meetings, as you know, and present and say, we think this should be improved in town, or we think you should look into this, or there's a safety issue over here. So those kind of things. We're guided, of course, by our strategic plan. And our strategic plan, I believe we are going to whatever council is there in 2024, I think that's when we look at that again to update it.
Right.
But that definitely guides us
Sure.
for sure as a vision for the town. And I think our boards and commissions also have a lot of input also to some needs of the community. So that's important. Yep.
Well, that's a really good way of explaining it, and make sure that every aspect, whether it's a board commission, the strategic plan, which the council approved a few years back, all of these are components that help shape the budget. So maybe I'll ask you, Marion, to maybe share with us a little bit about how the resources are used and our overall approach to budgeting.
Sure thing. Tonight we're going to talk about the operating budget. We have two budgets, an operating budget and a capital budget. Capital budget is for building buildings, paving roads, that sort of thing. I'm going to focus more tonight on the operating budget, which is all of our employees and services that we provide to town residents. So what makes up our budget? Well, governments, as you know, we're not the federal government, we're a local government. We have to balance our budget. We don't run at a deficit. We make sure that we do not spend more than we take in. So we take in revenues and we spend them on expenditures. Well, what kind of things are those? So the operating budget is really for services. Those people you see out in those trucks driving around town, emptying your trash, trimming trees, maintaining our parks, those people. Our revenues in the general fund is our largest operating fund. It's where most of our employees are. And the revenue sources there are your real estate taxes. Residents of Vienna pay real estate taxes both to Vienna and to Fairfax County for services that we don't provide as a town. Like we don't provide schools or libraries, that's provided by the county. But our residents pay us real estate taxes. Also, we get a portion of sales taxes. Our businesses in town pay taxes. There are other utility taxes that we collect. Parks and recreation services are for fees, so those fees are collected here. Police, when they ticket you, that's another fee, so other fees. Our money earns some interest, but very conservatively. So those are our major sources of revenue. And what impacts you, the resident? Well, taxes impact you, fees if you use those classes, and then what services that we, the town, provide. So this is a pie chart that sort of talks about where our general fund revenues come from, because it's easy to think that it all comes from property taxes or real estate taxes, but only 42% of our total revenue in the general fund comes from property taxes. To contrast that with the county gets over 60% of their revenues from real estate taxes. So we are not quite as dependent on real estate taxes as the county.
Can I ask, can you
Sure.
explain that? Like why would you say that?
Oh, I just think it's kind of an interesting fact.
Right.
I think our taxes used to be more like 50%, but now other sources, for instance, sales taxes. We were concerned during the pandemic about sales taxes. What's going to happen? But people switched their spending to online spending, even though they weren't going to stores and spending. And our sales taxes have just gone through the roof. Now, we were also worried about sales taxes. There were plans at the state level that the governor was going to take away the grocery tax, which is a component of sales taxes. Well, that didn't happen either. So sales taxes have done really well. business license taxes. We were again concerned during the pandemic that our businesses would suffer, but our biggest businesses are like grocery stores and drugstores, and some consultants and things like that are mainly coronavirus resistant. So business license taxes did all right. And then the other large, those are the largest sort of segments of our taxes. Then there's fees for Parks and Rec services. We have interest on our investments, and then some other miscellaneous fees. We get a lot of money from the state. The state of Virginia gives us money because we maintain our roads, so they give us money for that. The state of Virginia also helps us support our police department. So that's why the state piece of the pie is a little bigger. And we spend those on general fund expenditures. Well, what are those? So we're talking about general fund expenditures. What comprises the expenditures from the general fund? Well, as you can see from the slide, over 70% of our costs in the general fund go to salary and benefits. We have about 175 of our 195 employees work for the general fund and do things like empty the trash, maintain the parks, provide the IT infrastructure support, our police department, and their salaries and benefits make up 71% of the general fund expenditures. Purchase services, the largest component of that is landfill fees. As when we collect your trash, then we take them to the landfill. Also, a lot of maintenance contracts, software contracts, our IT infrastructure costs, things like that. Other charges are utilities mainly, so the water and electricity and gas to heat these buildings. Materials and supplies are things like materials and supplies and other supplies also include things to run our vehicles, our office supplies, when we mail you a bill, the cost of that paper, that sort of thing. And then programs and services are mainly the cost to produce Parks and Rec programs. And then capital outlay are just a small amount of things come out of the general fund that are capital, such as some of our vehicles, and if we need a new desk or things like that, and then other things. And this is a pie chart kind of showing it by function. And it shows that public works is the largest piece of the pie at 34%, followed by police at 15% and parks and revenue at 9%. And the rest of us are in different places. Another major operating fund is the water and sewer fund. The town of Vienna provides water and sewer services to our residents and some outside town. We collect fees, and that makes up 97% of the revenue source for water and sewer, so the bill you get. Plus, there's a portion of that that is from developers. So when you see these new developments going up on Maple Avenue, when you see a new house being built, they pay some funds to the water and sewer fund to make that connection to the water system. So there's our revenues. But the water and sewer fund is a little different than the general fund. Only about 15 to 16% of their total costs are made up of salary and benefits, because the major part of their costs, the water and sewer fund's costs, are the water that we purchase from Fairfax County to resell to residents, and then we send out our sewer to two different jurisdictions, Fairfax County and DC, depending on where you live in town. And it's about 50-50 split. So really, sewer treatment charges are the largest single cost in the water and sewer fund. Then also, the water and sewer fund transfers money to the general fund to pay for shared services. Like, I probably spend 20% of my time in the general fund. Some of my billing staff spends 100% of their time in the water and sewer fund. And some of my billing staff spends 100% of their time in the water and sewer fund. And then the last item there is capital project fund. That's to pay for the water and sewer fund's portion of their infrastructure, which is water pipes and sewer pipes. So that's by type of expenditure. Then moving on to, we have divisions within that. So operations and maintenance of water is 27%, sewer services 30%, meter reading and meter maintenance and reading is 6%, and billing customer service, which is in finance, is 2%. And the rest of those transfers I referred to. So that's what we spend money on the water and sewer fund. Now let's talk about the budget development process. So right now we are in the planning process. We are trying something a little different than what we've done before, and we're trying to set our budget goals very early in the process. Department heads are coming to, we have a budget committee comprised of the town manager, the finance director, and 4 4 other directors, 2 who rotate, 2 who are permanent. We meet and discuss all of the budget before presenting it to council. We're having a planning session with council in December to talk about our key priorities of things we want to put into the budget for the next year. Then we have we have an all-day Saturday conference session and an evening conference session with council, where every department presents their budget to council and council asks them a lot of questions. These can be attended by the public, but the public is not allowed comment at those. Now in April we have public hearings, and those public hearings you are welcome to come and comment. The budget document itself for the next fiscal year is released to the public in March, so it's on the internet. You can get a hard copy from us of the proposed budget, and you can look at it and ask us questions at any time. And then the budget goes for council vote in May. By the state law, we're supposed to have a balanced budget by June 30th, but we like to schedule it in May just in case something happens. For instance, in 2020, when everything was being turned upside down with COVID, we blew right past May and trying to get more information about what 21 was going to be like, and didn't adopt our budget till later in June. But in general, we'll adopt it in May. So when can you give feedback? You can give feedback anytime. Here's our website. On our website, we have email. You can email council. You can email the mayor, the town manager, or me. I'm finance. You can call us. You can show up. You can schedule an appointment or just show up. I know the mayor has office hours, but we're really glad to talk to you about this. My mission in life is to make sure you understand it. You understand what we do and why we do it, and we want to get feedback from you. I don't feel like we get a whole lot of, we get some feedback. It's a little spotty, but we would welcome any kind of feedback. So, for instance, if you want to add a program, occasionally we talk about a skateboard park. We don't have a skateboard park in town. We want to add a skateboard park. Well, is it of general interest? Because we're not going to do something. We do have some programs that just cater to niche interests, but in general, we want something of general interest. Let's keep our kids busy, right? But what does it cost? Do we have land for a skateboard park? Do we have to buy some land? Is there any open land in Vienna? Probably not. And then if we do something like that, how do we pay for it? Because if we had to buy a $800,000 piece of land and then build $500,000 or $600,000 worth of ramps and all that sort of stuff, and then hire some staff to make sure the kids don't kill themselves and pay for insurance, we're talking about $2 million. We can't charge that for a skateboard park. That's not going to work. So what do we do? So we're not going to add a program like that unless there's going to be a way for it to pay for itself, or we can figure out another way to pay for it. And what can we cut? Our expenditures can't exceed our revenues. So are we going to cut a service? I don't think so. Are we going to take a policeman off the street? I don't think so. And are we going to cut water we purchase? I don't think so, because we need to, you turn your tap, you want water to come out. So those are the kind of questions that council and staff deal with when we try to think about what we want to do. We always want to provide more services, but we don't want to raise the tax rate. So how are we going to pay for them? For instance, if we can decrease we get our real estate parcels, your property where you live, is assessed by Fairfax County. That's just one of the services we get from the county, because it makes sense for them to charge off the same base for the county and the town. But we levy our own tax rate and we collect our own tax rate. So 1 cent on our current assessment is about $614,000. If we were to cut 1 cent out, if there were no increases in assessment, that would be about 8 employees. So we were able to cut the tax rate last year because assessments went up. We didn't exactly equalize it, but we came pretty darn close to equalizing it. And we didn't have to cut anything out of the budget. We didn't have to change any services. So those are the sorts of things that we talk about. And then I'd like to know feedback. What's important to you? What sort of questions do you have?
So before we maybe turn to questions from the audience here, let's go back a few slides, because I wanted you to finish, but I had a few questions. Go back some more.
General fund?
No, go back to the slide where it talks about the process, the calendar.
Calendar. I went past that. There we go.
Okay, so with the calendar, all right, so we're in the process now where we're planning the budget, and so residents can contact us now.
Sure.
They can email all of the council members. They can email me, you. They can come in, like you mentioned, and let us know what they would want to spend taxpayer dollars for going forward. And they can do that throughout that process. On that calendar, starts in December. Staff's going to go to the council with some general ideas and thoughts, and then the council is going to hear that, and then in January is going to let us know where to prioritize, how to spend our efforts and energy. Throughout that whole process, residents can continually give us information about how they would like the money spent.
Really, throughout the whole year, really.
Right.
I mean, for instance, our Parks and Recreation Department, they're very creative. They get people asking them for classes. They find a way to give those classes. Now they are able to sort of balance the cost of an instructor with the cost of fees. Residents can come in and ask us for what services they want, and if they have ideas of how we can raise the money for it, I'm all for that too. However, the state of Virginia limits us very much as to what we can tax or charge fees on. So while we would love to tax other things, I would love to tax other things, council would not. We don't have that luxury. We cannot change our revenues.
Sure. And so within that calendar that we're talking about, in a lot of ways, staff's ideas are just like residents' ideas, because we won't have true revenue numbers until February. So we're kind of idealistic or blue sky thinking, just like residents are, and we're trying to consider, okay, what would be good for residents, and residents tell us what would be good for them as well. And so we put that before the council, and then December into January, that's when council says, well, staff focused in this direction. And then we work on that. And in February, which is when we get the revenues. At the end of February, we get revenue numbers from Fairfax County and assessment numbers. And then when we get to March is when we have the conference sessions where we have the two meetings, one on a Saturday and one in March, where residents can come in and they can listen to the process and watch and observe us as the council deliberates on the budget. And then there's the public hearings. That's when they can speak in public about the budget itself. So there's always an opportunity to come and speak. The mayor's office hours, my hours, to come speak to you. It's an ongoing process. So I want to make sure residents know and understand that they can always let us know what's on their mind. Let's go to the next slide, because I have more. I had more.
Sure.
All right.
And can I jump in?
Sure.
This is just quick, but changing to December as for a first look was something that council, for the first time, said this past year, because we didn't want to hear at the kind of toward the end of the process that, well, these are things we wanted, but they didn't really fit into the budget. And we were like, oh, well, wait a minute. We think these are important, but we've kind of already, I don't know if we have money for them. So it's kind of nice to hear about those things from staff early, if it's a position or something like that. So it'll be interesting. I think, it'll be good to try that out. I think we know that, like you said, the real numbers won't come in until February, so we won't have everything. But at least it'll be in our minds, and we'll be thinking about it.
And I think it'll be better, too, because particularly from the staff side of it, to hear from council early on, December, January, then we kind of know where to put our energy. Because a lot of times, over the years, we think, well, I think this is what council wants to do. So that's
good communication.
I think that's going to help.
And we're looking to council to tell us also what the citizens want, because they hear a lot more from the citizens than we do. So if council can take the voice of the citizens, give it to staff, and then staff can focus our attention in that direction. So that's what we're trying to do.
Great.
And maybe go to the next slide.
Okay.
Because I had more. So the general interest, costs, how do we pay? So on this part here, when it comes to the example that you talked about for like the skate park, right? So one thing about the programs that we provide, many of them don't pay for themselves. So when the council considers to add something new, it has to do with the council's thoughts about how it will serve the public in general. And is it something that's worthy of spending those hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, knowing that it won't be a break-even proposition, but as long as the overall budget balances, is this something that the council wants to do? That's probably something that you would,
that's a good point. I mean, we've added things like Liberty amendments.
Right.
So a lot of activities.
Right.
Well, it doesn't cost to go to a Liberty amendments event, of course, which is great, but it takes staff time.
Takes staff time, right.
And so those kind of costs, but yeah, we listen to what the public says, and it's pretty
Right.
obvious, and things that are well attended or not, then, well, we kind of adjust the next year.
Right, absolutely. And then maybe the next slide. There was,
Sure.
Okay, so then, so taxes. So that's an interesting one because while we have to balance our budget, the economy is doing some interesting things, and inflation is hitting everyone. So when you talk about the cost of buying new tires, the cost of fuel, the cost of equipment, and then that's to provide the services. But then we have employees who, when they go to the store, their bread and milk and gas to get here, to commute, is increasing as well. So
Sure.
it's a balance. And then the residents are also experiencing this squeeze because for them the same thing applies. I mean, the cost of buying clothes and milk and the bare necessities are increasing. So this year we were able to lower the rate, not necessarily the bill for everyone, but the rate itself. And we were able to also do compensation increases. So going into this next year, maybe we should talk just a little bit about, our thoughts about this next year, because
Sure.
It's going to probably be similar, and so we're going to probably have some of the similar challenges.
Right.
Right.
well,
Yeah.
Go
No,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
I just something that you said. The council, as you know, just got back from the Virginia. Well, you were there
Right,
too.
right.
The Virginia Municipal League. Well, we heard, both of us, and just meeting with other jurisdictions, even close by, heard from other towns and cities that they're having a hard time hiring employees, and some of them are down. I mean, we are fortunate. I
Right,
know we're
right.
down a little bit, but we're we back up on, I think, police and everything.
Right.
But that's something to think about. We don't want to lose good employees, and so I just wanted to throw that in, that's
Right.
something that's happening all over.
Right.
Yeah,
So it is a balance.
For instance,
Right.
there's sort of, it may be nationwide, but certainly area-wide
Right.
shortage of certified drivers, CDL
Yes, that-
drivers.
exactly.
Right.
Yes,
And so,
we heard about
we
that
need to make
also.
sure we have enough CDL drivers
Very
so that
important.
we can empty the trash and drive the big
Right.
trucks, and also plow the snow in the winter.
Yes,
Right.
these
Things
are
like that.
services are.
So yeah, we're
important.
definitely, my job is very interesting. There's got a lot of interesting factors, unusual factors at play right now.
Right.
For instance, all the things that you mentioned that affect the average consumer affect us too. We were really concerned in June. We passed a budget in May, and now gas prices were going straight to the roof.
Right.
So we were a little worried about that. Now we do have a few contingency reserves, and one way we can cope in a situation like this is to the effect it doesn't affect operations, but maybe leave a position vacant. Have a lower level person do more of a manager's job for a certain period of time so that we can cut costs elsewhere if gas prices continue to be high. Now they were down for a while, now they're coming back up again. Like you mentioned, there is pressure on wages due to staff, and that creates staffing shortages.
Right.
Right.
So far, we're all right. We did take a look at, there's also nationwide issues with public safety.
Right.
And we know in the area, there's a lot of competition for hiring public safety officers, and it's something that's very important to our residents. One of the things they like about living in Vienna, we've learned through surveys, is they feel very safe here.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure we've got good qualified staff, and so we've got to pay them right,
Right.
Right.
for that.
Right.
We did look at their compensation, we did work with them and adjusted it.
Right.
We're able to do that without having a union or things like that, and
Right.
and we're almost at full staff with the police, which is
Right.
a good thing.
Right.
Other supplies like goods and paper, like we're getting a software upgrade. We're going to try to start doing more e-bills so we can save some money on paper and things like that. But not everybody wants an e-bill, and not
Exactly.
everybody, and people
Right.
like their newsletter and
Yes.
things like that. So
Yes.
some of those things we're going to have to do. Another thing that is sort of a concern for me, since it's 42% of our revenue is property taxes. Out of that, about 80% is residential.
Yes.
We all have heard that mortgage interest rates have really gone up.
Right.
So you drive around Vienna, you still see a lot of residential redevelopment, which I think is fantastic.
Yes.
But I do wonder how long that'll continue
Yeah.
with mortgage rates
Right.
rising.
Right.
Cost
Right.
of supplies are going up.
Right.
On the builder side, there's a lot of factors, obviously.
Right.
Right.
Inflation,
It's
right.
interesting, not necessarily in a good
Rates.
way,
Right.
May you live in interesting times. We're living in interesting times.
Right, and we were just talking about that this afternoon,
Yeah.
about how this upcoming year might be similar to the one we just had, because I think, as I understand it, the housing activity this year, and we're in October.
Still strong, yeah.
So it's still strong, but next year it probably won't be because of the interest rates. So this upcoming budget might be okay, but it might be the budget after that where we see the slowdown. So we have to kind of think almost 2 years out in a sense, while at the same time paying attention to the tax rate and seeing if we can help in that area, paying attention to the compensation, making sure that we're taking care of our residents, and then, oh, by the way, services, right? They have to be maintained at the same level. So we have to balance all of those things. I think this year we may be able to do that again, but I'm concerned about the year after with the interest rates, what they're looking like. They're going to be.
Right. I mean, that I don't see how it can't be somewhat of an impact here.
Right.
But we'll see.
Right. I know we can talk. This is our favorite topic.
Yeah.
We talk about this. So, Mayor, what are some considerations that you think the council would need to prioritize, and what role will the community play in developing those priorities?
Well, we have some exciting things coming
Yeah.
up. As you know, we purchased the Faith Baptist Church. Now we're calling it the Annex. That's something that we definitely want resident input. This is not what does the council want to do. This is what does the town want to do with this. So I believe a feasibility study is going to be done, because we don't want to say, we want to put a circus there and that's too small, or whatever, a zoo, or I don't know, I'm just making things up. But it has to be, it has to fit that property. And so after that, we'll do some community outreach. So I'm excited about that. We're also going to be, we're doing that park master plan.
Right,
So
that's
citizen comments on that is very important. Of course, we're also, Code Create is still going on. We are trying to get that done, hopefully by spring of next year, or no, excuse me, fall. Let's say fall.
Let's explain what that is, Mayor. if you
Right.
would.
So Code Create, our zoning code is very old, goes back to the 1960s. And so we need to update it, we need to reorganize it. And we've been working on it for a long time, but it takes a while, because we pulled out a couple things. We pulled out front porches, for example, or we pulled out outdoor dining, lot coverage. That was a big one. And we got a lot of resident input, which was fantastic. And we try to do something that balances and that makes the most people, I guess, satisfied, but also what is good for our future of our town. I mean, we have to think of those kind of things. So while we listen to the residents, we also have to think, it always has to be balanced. Everything has to be balanced, because we are always ranked, one of the top towns in the nation. There's a reason for that, right? So we want to keep so many things that we already do right, and don't make too many changes. But those are some of the things coming up, I think, that we're going to be looking forward to engaging with residents even more.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So maybe, I don't know if any residents have any questions. This would be a good time to turn to some of the audience here. And we'll do the best we can to answer your questions.
Matt DeFiore, you talked about salaries and benefits being about 70% of our expenditure. How does that benchmark with other towns in Virginia?
I only have anecdotal answers, but we talked to Herndon quite a bit. We talked to Herndon, Falls Church, Fairfax City, Leesburg. The localities that are close in size to us and close by us. It's very similar. We look at employee counts. We look at salary. We compare salaries. We do a class and compensation study. So we have we look at benchmarks and statistics also. Number of public safety officers per population, things like that. Number of public works.
Right.
And then we also look at turnover, because turnover isn't necessarily an indication of wage dissatisfaction. It can, with the baby boom generation sort of retiring, so that's one indicator. But we do look at a lot of statistics like that.
And
I feel like we're pretty close.
And the classification, looking at different job types, and then the compensation, looking at what they earn, their wages, it gives us a good comparison in the region. And then I know we both go to state conferences, and generally speaking, in local government, you're going to have 55, 60, 65% is going to be, the budget's going to be compensation and benefits. I mean, because you have to have people to do it. If you're going to fix a water main break, that's people who's going to be able to do that. And sanitation is going to be people. So a lot of it is typically around 55, 60, 65.
So we're like
70%.
I think we used to be more like 75%, so now
Right.
we're a little bit lower.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because you're only basically throwing 30% at operating the town, which is amazing for what we get here. Okay, next question. How do you do a formal program review with all the departments periodically to see what's working and what's not, what can be improved, what can't be? I know a few years ago when we went from twice a week trash pickup to once a week, the notion was that was going to be good. But I've never seen anything that says how good it was. So does that happen routinely?
Yes, we do. I mean, it's something that each department independently looks at how effectively their services are being they're providing services. And from time to time, we may say that this particular aspect of what we do, it may cost more than it's worth it to actually provide that service, or there may be a new efficient way to do something, or there may be a position that maybe 20 years ago was valuable, but now is not necessarily needed. And so we typically are doing internal reviews, and that's part of the budget committee process also. When the department directors are in front of the budget committee, we're often asking those kind of questions to find out if they actually need the number of employees to do a particular task, mm-hmm. or the particular service. You know, let's say sanitation. Do we want to select vehicles that have the arm? Mm-hmm. You know, or do we want to have individuals doing that? Okay, well, let's do an analysis and see. So we're constantly looking at what's the most efficient way to do the business.
And we're looking at key performance indicators.
Right.
I think we're sort of still in the infancy stage with that, but so I work closely with the Government Finance Officers Association. It's one of my goals to get their annual certificate for budgeting. They have really pulled key performance indicators in. So those are benchmark sort of things that we're trying to look at for every department.
Okay, one final question. It seems to me that you need to have a line item in your budget for innovation, because there are a lot of things that the town could be doing that it's not. And if the department head is playing with what he had last year or she had last year, it doesn't leave a lot of room for new ideas to surface, and the champion, who's going to champion a new program? For example, I've got a burr under my saddle. I think the town needs to get into geographic information systems, bigger than it is, because I see benefit in terms of efficiencies and economies when Public Works puts everything into GIS and Police Department throws their stuff into GIS, and planning and zoning stuff is in GIS. I don't think we're anywhere close to taking that and making it work for the town. And the only way I see that can happen is if you have a dedicated part of your budget that looks at innovation and experimentation and pilots, so that you can get there. That's it. Thank you.
Well, no, I was just thinking, aren't we working on a new, some new software that will help both finance and also planning zoning? Am I correct?
Yes, but I
Right?
think what Mr. DeFiore is referring to is this is like the
Yeah.
geographic, I can't know what you guys
No,
think.
no, no,
Geographic-
I understand that's
like
different.
putting-
I'm just
putting the
thinking
wa-
innovation.
Putting the water pipes on things and all that. But yeah,
Right.
we've talked about things
Right.
like, wouldn't it be interesting to see
Right.
real estate assessed values on a map? Like where,
No, that's
where
interesting.
are the $600,000
Right.
houses? Where are the $1.5 million
Yeah.
houses? Things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, when you get to things like the proverbial sidewalk question, okay, where are the gutters in the town? I mean, if you had GIS, you would know, okay, these streets don't have curb and gutters, these do. These have sidewalks on one side of the street, the other side of the street. Well, you know, see, if you've got it, there are some people in town that might be willing to help you do things if they knew that you had the interest in it.
Yeah.
Right. And
That's
so,
interesting.
and to
Yeah.
your point, I mean, we should be doing, and could be doing more with geographic information system, GIS, and innovation. We could and should be doing more with that, and we can look into that, and we should, and we'll talk about that at the budget committee level. I know that we do a little bit of it. To give you an example, we have these internal awards that I think they're called STAR Awards, for employees who come up with something that is innovative, something that's unique. I know, for example, maybe a couple of years ago, there was a team in Public Works where they actually, the town was about to contract out for service and spend X amount of dollars. The team internally said, we can do that. And they did it themselves. They saved the town $20,000 or $30,000 because they knew how to do it in-house. And so we gave them a reward for that. And so those are some of the small incentives to help with innovation. It doesn't go to the extent that you're talking about. I think you're talking about even in a bigger scale than what I'm saying. But we do some things, but I think you're right. We probably could be better served to meet a little bit more leaning in toward innovation as a whole. But I think that's a good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. Hello, I'm Mike Middle. I'm on 1007 Westwood Drive Northeast. A couple of areas I just wanted to ask questions about or give some feedback. And I understand the tax rates and what we went through, especially the salary increases this year, which was needed, right, for the staffing and that. But when I was looking at our budget from 21 to 22, 22, 23, a big chunk of our increase this year was in debt service. And I know that wasn't, that was a $1 million increase this year to our budget. That comes off of the big investments. I get it, right? That comes out. My feedback or thoughts is we really need to think about putting a little bit of reins on how much more we grow that, because that comes right off the top, and that's got to come out.
That's the capital budget, which we didn't really talk about today.
Right.
And yes, we have a model where we're forecasting forward. The town leaders back in 1990 had a lot of foresight. They pledged the meals tax. They started meals tax in 1990, pledged that to capital improvements. And so we're looking at forecasting out meals taxes. Our debt model is based on that. We're only borrowing money to the extent that our meals taxes can pay it back. We ramped up and saved money for several years, and then we invested in the community center and the police station. And you're correct, we are not going to borrow a lot of money in the next couple of years, because now that those projects are completed, we are going to go for a little while without borrowing any money and pay down some of that current debt. We are well within the limits of the state of Virginia, but like a realtor taking you out for a mortgage, they'll tell you you can afford a much bigger mortgage than you're going to afford. We're nowhere near that, and we can't really afford to do that.
Right.
But we have the capacity right now to pay for that. One of the pleasant surprises that came out of the pandemic was how the town responded to the restaurants. It was to their advantage to help keep them in business, but that kept generating revenue. Now that the pandemic impact is pretty much over, there are loads of new restaurants in town, and they are producing enough revenue to help pay for this for these capital improvements?
Right.
A very astute question.
Right, and when I arrived in 2011, one of the first things I did was put in place our CIP, long-range CIP plan, capital improvement plan, and so it looks out to like 2000, at this point, 2034, I think it is, or 2036. And so what we do is we look at, just as Marion just mentioned, the revenue that comes solely from mills tax pays for the debt service. We knew when we did the community center and then the police station that it was going to spike up. So going forward now for the next few years, we're not going to be going out for quite as much and our mills tax revenue over this period of time is still increasing. So it continues to increase, and we're just not going to go out for the same amount of money, and that's going to help to plan that out. That's the reason why I want to do that long-term approach, so that we know in 2023, 24, 25, and on, we know to maybe slow down some of the spending on the capital side, let the revenues catch up, and then if we want to do something special again, maybe it's 2028, but we want to kind of hold the line here and let the plan work the way it's supposed to. Yeah.
Oh, very good. That's good to hear. Hearing the meals tax coverage in terms of managing the debt service and that, I think that messaging isn't necessarily understood around town as well as it should be.
Well, thank you for letting us know.
I think you're right. I think that's right.
Because when you look at the budget, it doesn't necessarily tell you what's applied to wherever, right?
Yeah,
So-
that is very helpful for us to know.
Yeah. The other area, so this comes back down to residential property tax, okay? So mine's up in the town, up almost 9% this year. My bill's gone up. Over the last 5 years, it's been up 22% for the town. I'm not talking about the county. That's a completely other disaster. That went up 14% for me this year. And so I looked over the history since I've bought in Vienna in '99, and it's up about 140%. Cost of the CPI over that same period of time is 77%. Not nearly as bad as Fairfax, which my bill is up 240% over that same period of time, with the cost of living going up 77%. When you see those kind of numbers, now I understand this year's spike and I understand recovering on budget, but again, taking the long-term effect, that's not a sustainable growth level for the homeowner. My biggest increase in inflation this year is my home cost. It's not my gasoline. Food's up, but not nearly as much. My lovely bride keeps great spreadsheets. It is in the taxes I'm paying on my property. So just feedback for your understanding, and I know there's others around town that are thinking the same way. Now, some of that tax increase, your base increase, has gone up because I'm a neighbor to one of those tear downs that's going on over on Westwood, and it's going to be like 2.5 times the value, right? If they get that, I think with interest rates, that would be questionable. So you're going to still get some of that growth, but just feedback. Please keep the residents, the homeowners. I'd like to see more growth in the commercial real estate by getting some more commercial business space in here, along our zone. Not high density residential. While it brings in revenue, it also brings in a lot of cost because you got to service all that high density residential. Right. So just food for thought. And I have just one question. This is for you for the finance side. The 35% that's transferred out of our water bills that goes in, where does that transfer to for what?
The general fund. The general fund, and then to pay for shared services. For instance, I'm the director of finance. My salary is paid 100% from the general fund, but I probably spend about 20% of my time on water and sewer because I have billing and customer service in my department.
Okay.
We have cashiers there. 2 cashiers are taking all the money. Their salaries are paid by the general fund.
Right.
They probably spend 80% of their time on the water and sewer fund. It's an indirect cost allocation. We're actually looking at examining that again this year to make sure that that transfer is correct.
Thank you very much. Because I had asked years ago when we moved into Vienna, I had asked about that. And
that and also paying for the capital expenditures for replacing water pipes.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
a big
Yeah.
big deal because we're they're aging. I mean, our
Right.
infrastructure is aging, and we had so many breaks and water main
our water main
and-
breaks were above industry average, and so
awful.
we're
Right.
investing
and
more
so
money there.
that actually made our rates go up, and so
Right.
we're fixing those. We're lining them. I know we're doing a lot of that. So we know residents don't want that.
That triggers a follow-on question. What's our water wastage percentage, and how do we match other?
That's something I don't have an answer for you. I will have to follow up.
Right.
I have looked at it before, and I've been here a long time, and I've looked at it over the years. There was a point in time where it varied a lot. Like it would go in the direction you'd think it might, that you're wasting some water, and then it would go in the other direction because you're looking at the water that you purchase versus the water that you sell.
Right.
At that point, we went through and realized we were not metering town departments, so we started to meter all the town buildings. So that helped it a little bit. I would have to do another study on that.
Right.
But that's a very good statistic to look at.
And I think every community has water loss. Every community does, and it's something that communities we watch to see. Okay, when we have to pay for all the water that comes in, but then look at what the usage is. So there is always a bit of loss, water loss, in every jurisdiction, and so we'll get back to you to let you know.
I've got no problem with the loss, but I do know that we purchased a couple of years ago, maybe 5 to 8 years ago, equipment that would measure water losses and things like that. And so the question becomes, all right, well, how active is the program to do the surveying, the spot checking, to make sure that we aren't losing it when we don't have to because we haven't done something?
And we'll have to follow up on that directly, but our investment in water pipes helps with that too, because there's a lot of silent water loss. You see a water main break when it comes up through the pavement. We don't know how many of them are going into the ground.
Right.
So that equipment that you're talking about is supposed to get there. I have not asked about that recently, but we'll follow up on that.
That's a good DPW question.
It is.
And we are going to do this indirect cost study and water rate study, so I'm sure those things will come up.
Right.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Okay.
We're
Thank
glad
you.
to have you, and thank
I know,
you for
I know,
asking
yes.
questions.
Makes it more interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Mary, anything that maybe has been unsaid that you think should be said tonight?
No, again, we operate trying to do our best to serve the residents of Vienna, but it's great to hear from you that we'd like to hear from more residents to see what's really on their minds and what's
Right.
important to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And all three of us live in town, right? And so, we do things in town, and, I coach, different leagues and things, and you're out and about, and different programs and activities, and you're out and about as well. So, these things impact us as well, Our assessments go up, and and all those
And our friends and neighbors talk
That's
to us
right.
too.
my water bill this month was the highest it ever has been, and
yeah.
my wife looked at me and said, what is that? What is going on here?
Yeah.
So all of these things impact us as
Right.
well.
Right.
Anything that's left
You
unsaid,
know,
maybe?
I echo what Marion said, is that we really do, of course, like to hear from residents. I mean, and I am out and about a lot, and a lot of the conversations that I have are on my walks or meet the mayor, but also just, the grocery store or with my friends or whatever, when I see people at games or whatever. But we will always, emails are great. I think that, and we're going to get a survey out soon. I think we're going to have another community survey. That's really important because I think we can look at that and judge, where are residents happy? What things do we need to work on? But before it gets to that, also, I think is good to hear from people. And people are busy. That's the
Right.
thing. And we always have to remember that people are busy raising their families, running their lives. Sometimes they don't have time to come to a council meeting or come tonight. I appreciate that you two are here. So I always think it's incumbent upon us to also go out to residents and talk to them, get their input.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you both for spending time here with me. Great topic. I mean, we could talk about this forever. I mean, every day we're talking numbers
Yeah.
and guessing what might happen. But I really appreciate you all spending time this evening and talking about this. And everyone, I thank you for watching and tuning in, and for our audience here who gave us some really good questions. I hope everyone has a very enjoyable rest of your week and enjoy the beginning of fall. I know I'm enjoying it. And we'll see you next time on On Deck with Mercury. Take care.